The hounds found us at midnight. I heard them before I saw them. That wet, guttural baying that sounds less like dogs and more like something dragged up from the bottom of a well. The kind of sound that doesn't ask if you're afraid. It already knows. I was crouched behind the rusted oil drums at the edge of the abandoned steel mill. My fingers wrapped around Fenris so tight I could feel his tiny heartbeat pulsing against my palm. 63 beats per minute. I'd learned to count them in the dark. It was the only way I knew he was still alive when I couldn't see his chest rise and fall. The moon hung fat and yellow above the tree line, and in its light, I saw Jonas step out of the shadows like he'd been stitched together from them. His boots didn't make a sound on the gravel. They never did. He moved the way all predators move, with that terrible patience that tells you he's already won, and he's just deciding how much he wants you to suffer first. Lisa? My name in his mouth sounded like a verdict. Did you really think I wouldn't find you? The hounds circled behind him, 7 of them, their eyes catching the moonlight like shattered glass. Drool hung from their jaws in silver threads. These weren't pack wolves. These were the monsters Jonas kept for one purpose only, to make examples of traitors, and tonight I was the traitor. Fenris whimpered against my chest. His milk-white eyes couldn't see Jonas, couldn't see the death walking toward us, but he could smell it. That sour tang of adrenaline and cruelty followed the alpha everywhere he went. I pressed my cracked lips to the top of his head. Shh. I breathed. Shh. Oh, little one, I've got you. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. My arms were shaking, not from fear, but from weakness. 3 months of giving him my food. 3 months of watching my body consume itself so he could live. My bones felt like chalk. My muscles had forgotten what strength meant. I didn't know if I was saving him or killing us both. Jonas whistled, one sharp, clean note that cut through the night like a blade, and the hounds began to move. But to understand how I ended up here, with death circling and a blind pup pressed against my heart, you need to know what I became. You need to know how an Omega learned to starve. Before I show you how this started, hit subscribe and that notification bell. Because of the twist at the end of this story, nobody survives it. Now, let me tell you how I became a monster. 3 months earlier, the Silver Ridge Pack ate together every night, and every night I ate last. That was the rule for Omegas. You wait until the alphas have filled their plates, until the betas have picked through what's left, until everyone who matters has had their fill. Then you take whatever remains, bones with the marrow already sucked out, gristle too tough for anyone else to chew, bread so stale it could crack teeth. I'd learned to be grateful for gristle. That night, Jonas sat at the head of the long oak table, firelight dancing across his face like it was afraid to settle. He had the kind of beauty that made you forget he was dangerous. Sharp jaw, eyes the color of winter ice, a smile that promised things it had no intention of delivering. His mate, Marin, sat beside him, her fork moving through her food without ever actually bringing any to her lips. She'd learned to survive on his attention alone. We all had. The patrols found something today. Jonas's voice cut through the chatter, and the room went silent. He didn't have to raise it. Alphas never do. A defect. Blind from birth. Abandoned in the eastern drainage tunnels. My stomach clenched. I kept my eyes on my plate. 2 strips of fat and a potato skin. but I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on the room like a physical thing. Pack purity is non-negotiable. He lifted a piece of meat to his lips, chewed slowly, and swallowed. The runt will be disposed of at dawn. Disposed of, like garbage, like something that never mattered. I didn't say a word. Omegas don't speak at meals. Omegas don't have opinions. Omegas certainly don't feel that hot, sick twist of rage climbing up their throat when the alpha sentences a pup to death for the crime of being born wrong. But I felt it. God help me. I felt it. I found him that night. The drainage tunnels beneath the Eastern Territory were a maze of concrete and rust, the kind of place where sounds got lost and never found their way back. I shouldn't have gone. Every instinct screamed at me to stay in my quarters, to keep my head down, to survive the way I'd always survived, by making myself small enough to be forgotten. But I couldn't stop thinking about that word. Defect. The pup was curled in a nest of dead leaves and discarded rags, so small he fit in both my hands. His fur was the color of smoke after a fire, and when I lifted him, his eyes found my face, even though they couldn't see it. Milk white, empty, beautiful. His nose pressed against my wrist, and he made a sound, not a whimper, not a cry, but something softer. Something that said, "I've been waiting for you. You shouldn't be here." I whispered, "Neither should I." He licked my thumb. That was the moment I became a thief. I stole food from the winter stores, just scraps at first, things no one would miss. A handful of dried meat. A wedge of cheese is going soft at the edges. Enough to keep a palm-sized pup breathing for one more day. Then one more. Then another. I named him Fenris, after the wolf in the old stories who was chained by the gods, because they feared what he might become. It seemed fitting. The pack feared him too. Feared what his blindness represented. What it said about their bloodlines, their strength, their precious purity. I didn't fear him. I feared what I was becoming. The hunger started slowly, the way all dangerous things do. At first, I told myself I was just eating less. Omegas were supposed to be thin. It made us look properly submissive, properly weak. No one would notice if I dropped a few pounds. But then the pounds kept dropping. My clothes hung off me as if they belonged to someone else. My hip bones jutted out like accusations. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger staring back. Hollow cheeks, shadows under her eyes deep enough to drown in, skin stretched tight over a skeleton that was slowly learning to show itself. I was feeding him everything. Every scrap, every stolen morsel, every bite I should have taken for myself. And my body was paying the price. The first time I tried to shift, I knew I was in trouble. Though we were required to run patrols in wolf form once a week, a privilege Jonas granted to even the lowest Omega. I'd always hated it, the way the others would watch me transform, comparing my small, unremarkable wolf to their sleek, powerful forms. But I'd never feared it, until that night. The shift started the way it always did, that crackling pressure beneath my skin, the sense of something larger trying to break free. But halfway through, my body stopped, like an engine running out of fuel. I felt my bones try to rearrange and heard them grind together with a sound like dry wood snapping. I bit through my lip to keep from screaming. The shift completed eventually. It had to, or I would have died, caught between forms. But when I finally stood on 4 legs, I was shaking so hard I could barely walk. My wolf was gaunt. Low ribs showing through matted fur, legs trembling with every step. I told the patrol leader I was sick, a stomach flu, something I ate. He looked at me with something that might have been suspicion or might have been disgust. With Omegas, it was hard to tell the difference. But there was one person who looked at me differently that night. Marin. The alpha's mate stood at the edge of the courtyard as the patrol returned, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. She wasn't supposed to be there. Mates didn't involve themselves in pack business, not unless their alpha commanded it. But there she was, watching me limp past with those dark, unreadable eyes. She didn't say anything, but her silence felt like a door left unlocked. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. The note appeared under my door 3 weeks later. I almost missed it. A small square of cream-colored paper, the kind they used for official pack correspondence, folded once and slipped through the gap while I slept. The handwriting was elegant, precise. Each letter was formed with the careful attention of someone who'd been taught that penmanship mattered. He's checking the quarters tomorrow. Move your secret or lose it. No signature, no explanation. Just 9 words that made my blood turn to ice. I read it 3 times, waiting for the meaning to change, for some other interpretation to reveal itself. But there was only one thing it could mean. Someone knew about Fenris, and someone was warning me. The inspection came at dawn. I'd spent the entire night moving him, my body screaming in protest with every step. The new hiding place was deeper in the tunnels. Eve passed the flooded section where the water ran black and cold, in a chamber so far from the pack's territory that no one had any reason to go there. No one except a desperate Omega with a secret to bury. By the time Jonas arrived at my quarters, I was standing at attention beside my cot, my hands clasped behind my back to hide their trembling. The room was spotless. The room was always spotless. Omegas were expected to maintain their spaces with military precision, ready for inspection at any moment. But this wasn't a routine inspection. I could tell by the way Jonas moved through my doorway, slow and deliberate, his nostrils flaring as he drew in my scent. He was hunting. Lisa. He said my name like he was tasting it. You've been looking thin lately. The winter stores are low, Alpha. My voice came out steady. A small miracle. I've been rationing. He circled the room, running his fingers along my windowsill, checking for dust that didn't exist. Rationing. How responsible. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell the expensive cologne he wore. Sandalwood and something darker. Something that reminded me of old blood. His hand came up, and for one terrible moment, I thought he was going to touch my face. Instead, he gripped my chin, turning my head to the side, examining me like livestock. You know what I can smell on you, Lisa? I didn't answer. Couldn't. The rot of a secret. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. It's sweet. Almost maternal. My heart stopped. Just stopped, like a clock that had run out of time. He knew. He had to know. This was the moment where everything fell apart. Where he dragged me to the courtyard and made an example of the Omega who thought she could defy the Alpha's will. But secrets are like wounds. He released my chin and stepped back. Leave them alone, and they fester. Cut them open. He spread his hands, a mockery of innocence. Well, that's when the real pain begins. He left without searching the room. I didn't breathe for a full minute after the door closed behind him. The games started the next day. That's what they were. Games. I understood that now. Jonas knew I was hiding something, but he didn't know what, and rather than demand answers, he decided to play, to watch me squirm, to see how long it took before I broke. The first test was food. At dinner that night, he called me to the head of the table, something that had never happened in the 3 years I'd been part of the pack. Every eye in the hall turned to watch as I walked toward him, my legs unsteady, my stomach already cramping with hunger. "You've been so dedicated to your rationing," Jonas said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I thought you deserved a reward." He set a plate in front of me. Real food, fresh meat, still pink and glistening, roasted vegetables swimming in butter, a roll of bread so soft and warm I could smell the yeast from where I stood. "Eat," he commanded. "Now, while I watch." I ate. I ate every bite while the pack watched, while Jonas tracked each movement of my jaw with those pale, predatory eyes, while my stomach rebelled against food it had forgotten how to process. I ate until the plate was clean and my hands were shaking, and I thought I might be sick right there on the Alpha's table. "Good girl." Jonas's voice was silk over steel. "Now you're dismissed." I made it to the bathroom before I threw it all up. The second test was pain. He assigned me to the heavy labor rotation, hauling stones for the new wall they were building at the northern border. Work meant for wolves twice my size, wolves who ate full meals and slept full nights and didn't feel their muscles tear with every lift. I worked until my palms bled, until my back felt like it was made of broken glass, until one of the betas pulled me aside and said, "You need to stop. You need to tell someone." "Tell them what?" I asked. "That the Alpha is punishing me? Everyone can see it. No one cares." He didn't have an answer for that. The third test was isolation. Jonas spread rumors, whispers that I was unclean, that I'd been seen doing things an Omega shouldn't do, that I was too dangerous to associate with. One by one, the pack members who used to tolerate me, not befriend, Omegas didn't have friends, but tolerate, started keeping their distance. I became a ghost in my own home, and through it all, I kept feeding Fenris. Every night, I made the long walk to that hidden chamber. Every night, I watched him grow stronger while I grew weaker. His eyes never changed, still that milky white, still sightless, but something else was developing behind them. A presence, an awareness. He knew me now, not just my scent, but me. He would lift his head when I entered, turn his face toward me like a flower following the sun. He would press against my chest while I fed him, making that soft, rumbling sound in his throat that wasn't quite a growl and wasn't quite a purr. I was starving to death, and I'd never felt more alive. The breakthrough came on a night so cold, the air itself seemed frozen. I was returning from the tunnels, moving through the shadows the way I'd learned to move, silent, invisible, forgettable, when a hand closed around my wrist and pulled me into an alcove. "Maren!" "Don't scream," she whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Then why? He killed my first pup too." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her face in the darkness, searching for the lie, the trap, the catch. But all I saw was pain. Old pain, worn smooth by years of silence. "She was born small," Maren continued, her voice barely audible. "Too small," Jonas said. "A weakness in the bloodline. He drowned her in the river before she was a day old." My throat closed. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be careful. She pressed something into my hand, a key, old and iron heavy. The eastern gate, tomorrow night after the moon sets. Take your secret and run. It's the only way you both survive. She was gone before I could respond, melting back into the shadows as she'd never been there at all. I stood in that alcove for a long time, clutching the key so tight it left marks on my palm. Hope is a dangerous thing for an Omega. It makes you careless. It makes you believe in futures that were never yours to have. It makes you forget that alphas always know. I should have run that night. I should have grabbed Fenris and fled through the eastern gate and never looked back. But I was weak, too weak to make the journey without rest, too weak to carry him the miles it would take to reach safety. I told myself one more day to gather my strength, to plan the route, to say goodbye to the only life I'd ever known. One more day was all it took for Jonas to find the drainage tunnels. I don't know who told him. Maybe no one did. Maybe he'd been watching all along, tracking my movements, waiting for the perfect moment to spring his trap. It didn't matter. What mattered was the look on his face when he cornered me in the corridor the next evening. Fenris's chamber key still hidden in my pocket. You think I didn't know, little Omega? His smile was the kind that belongs on something with more teeth than conscience. I've known since the day you found him. I just wanted to see how far you'd go. The ground dropped out beneath me. All those weeks, all that suffering, all that desperate, clawing hope, and he'd been playing with me the entire time. Why? The words scraped out of me like broken glass. If you knew, why not just kill him? Because that would have been too easy. Jonas leaned close enough that I could see my reflection in his eyes. A hollow, starving thing that barely looked human anymore. And because I wanted you to love him first. I wanted you to sacrifice for him. I wanted you to have something precious. He straightened and adjusted the cuffs of his shirt. So I could take it away. They came for me at midnight, not gently. They never did anything gently. But with hands that gripped my arms hard enough to bruise, and voices that told me not to make this worse, as if there were some version of this that wasn't already the worst thing that had ever happened to me. They dragged me through the compound and out into the night, past the curious eyes of pack members who'd been roused from sleep to witness whatever spectacle Jonas had planned. Some of them looked away when I passed. Others smiled. I didn't fight. What was the point? My body had nothing left to fight with. The abandoned steel mill rose against the moonlit sky like the skeleton of something that had died a long time ago. Rusted girders, broken windows, the smell of old oil and older blood. This was where Jonas brought the wolves he wanted to break, the ones who challenged him, betrayed him, disappointed him in ways that required a public response. This was where he brought the ones he wanted to destroy. The pack formed a loose circle around the mill's central floor, torches planted in the cracked concrete, flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. In the center of it all stood Jonas, immaculate in a dark suit, Fenris dangling from his grip. My pup. My tiny, helpless, blind pup, held up like a trophy by the man who'd sentenced him to death before he even had a name. Silver Ridge! Jonas's voice rang out, rich with the theatrical pleasure of a man who loved the sound of his own performance. We gather tonight to address a crime against pack purity, a crime of deception, a crime of defiance. He turned, and his eyes found mine in the crowd, held them. A crime of love. Laughter rippled through the pack. Love. What a ridiculous thing for an Omega to feel. What a pathetic, predictable weakness. For 3 months, this Omega. He gestured to me with Fenris still clutched in his other hand. Has been hiding and feeding this defective creature, starving herself to keep it alive, lying to her alpha, betraying her pack. He paused, letting the accusation settle. Some of you might wonder why I allowed this to continue. His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. The answer is simple. I wanted her to hope. I wanted her to believe that her sacrifice meant something, that she could protect what she loved through sheer force of will. He lifted Fenris higher, and my pup whimpered, that soft, trusting sound he made when he was scared, the sound he made when he needed me. But hope is a lie Omegas tell themselves, and tonight we're going to watch that lie die. The hounds emerged from the shadows on his signal. 7 of them, massive and wrong, bred for violence rather than loyalty. Their eyes reflected the torchlight like polished obsidian. Their claws left gouges in the concrete floor. No! The word tore out of me before I could stop it. Please! Hold her. Hands grabbed my arms, forced me to my knees. I struggled, but my body had nothing left, just bones and desperation, and a scream building in my chest that couldn't find its way out. Jonas set Fenris on the ground. The pup stood there trembling, his blind eyes searching for me even though he couldn't see. His nose twitched. His small body turned, oriented itself toward where I knelt. I was crying. I hadn't cried in years, but I was crying now. Hot tears cutting tracks through the dirt on my face, my voice breaking into sounds that weren't words. Don't look away, Lisa. Jonas's command cut through my sobs. You did this to him. The least you can do is watch. The whistle was high and clean. The hounds began to move. What happened next should have been an ending. The beginning of the last terrible moment before everything went dark. The final brutal proof that hope was a lie and love was a weapon, and Omegas weren't meant to save anyone, not even themselves. But instead, something woke up. It started in my chest, a heat that had nothing to do with rage and everything to do with something older. Something that had been sleeping inside me for 3 months, fed by every meal I didn't eat, strengthened by every sacrifice I made, waiting for the moment when I had nothing left to lose. The ancient instinct. I'd heard of it in the old stories, the ones the elders told around winter fires when they thought the young wolves weren't listening. The power that came to those who starved themselves not for vanity, not for punishment, but for love. The transformation that happened when a wolf's body was stripped down to nothing but the essential primal need to protect. I'd thought it was a myth. I was wrong. My shifts started before I could think, before I could doubt, before I could remember that I was too weak to change forms without screaming. But there was no screaming this time. There was only power, raw and ancient and hungry, pouring into muscles that should have been atrophied, filling bones that should have been hollow. The guards holding me flew backward like they'd been hit by a truck. The shift completed in seconds. Not the pathetic, trembling wolf I'd become, but something else entirely. Something massive. Something that moved through the space between the torches like a shadow given teeth. Something that made every wolf in that circle take a step back. Jonas's expression flickered, the first time I'd ever seen him surprised. What? I didn't give him time to finish. The first hound died before it knew I was moving, my jaws closing around its throat with a force I didn't know I possessed. The second tried to reach Fenris and found itself flying through the air, slamming into a concrete pillar with a sound like wet thunder. The other scattered, hounds bred for violence, monsters that had terrorized the pack for years, running from the Omega they'd been sent to humiliate. I turned to Jonas. He stood frozen in the center of the circle, his face pale in the torchlight, his eyes wide with something he'd never felt before. Fear. Impossible. The word came out strangled. You're just an Omega. I shifted back, slowly this time, letting him watch, letting the pack watch, letting them all see what 3 months of sacrifice had made me. Not weaker, not broken, something else entirely. Something they should have feared from the beginning. I was an Omega, I said, my voice raw and strange. Now I'm the reason you're going to run. I could have killed him. Standing there in the ruins of his spectacle, surrounded by the unconscious bodies of his precious hounds, with the pack watching in stunned silence. I could have crossed the distance between us in a heartbeat. Could have torn out his throat before he even had time to scream. Part of me wanted to. That dark, starving part of my soul that had spent 3 months being humiliated, tortured, and broken down into nothing. That part of me wanted Jonas to feel exactly what Fenris had felt in those terrifying seconds before I reached him. The knowing. But I didn't want his death. Death was too easy, too clean, too merciful for a man who'd spent years making others suffer for his entertainment. I wanted him to live with what came next. Run, I said. Jonas stared at me. What? Run. I stepped toward him and he stepped back. The alpha of Silver Ridge, the most powerful wolf in 3 territories, was backing away from the Omega he'd tried to destroy. You have until I count to 30. Then I hunt you the way you plan to hunt him. He didn't move. Couldn't believe what was happening. That wasn't how the story was supposed to go. The Omega was supposed to kneel. Supposed to break. I'm supposed to die while the Alpha watched and smiled and proved once again that power belonged to the powerful. I picked up Fenris, cradled him against my chest, and when I spoke again, my voice wasn't my own anymore. It was something older, something that made the torches gutter and the wolves around us whimper and flatten their ears. 1. Jonas ran. He ran as he'd never run before, crashing through the rusted equipment, scrambling over debris, fleeing into the darkness beyond the mill. And I followed, not fast, not desperate, but slow, deliberate. The way a wolf follows prey it knows it will catch, the way he had followed me. I let him run for 10 minutes, let him believe, for just a moment, that he might escape, that there was some corner of his territory where the thing he'd created couldn't find him. Then I appeared in front of him. He screamed. Actually screamed, this man who had made others scream for sport, who had drowned pups and beaten wolves and smiled through it all, like cruelty was its own reward. Please. He fell to his knees. Please, I'll give you anything. Territory, status, freedom, just please. I don't want anything from you. I crouched down, Fenris still cradled against my heart, and looked into the eyes of the Alpha who had tried to take everything from me. I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember what it feels like to be helpless, to be hunted, to have someone with power decide that you don't deserve to exist. I leaned close. And I want you to spend the rest of your life knowing that an Omega, a starving, broken, defective Omega, could have killed you and chose not to. I left him there in the dirt. When I returned to the mill, the pack was waiting, not with anger, with something else, something I'd never seen directed at an Omega before: respect and fear. The elders stepped forward, ancient wolves who remembered the old ways, who knew the legends I'd thought were myths. They looked at me with eyes that saw more than flesh and bone. The ancient instinct chooses its hosts carefully, one of them said. It comes only to those who sacrifice without expectation, who loves without condition, who starve themselves to feed another. She's awakened something we haven't seen in generations, another added. The pack needs new leadership. Leadership that understands that true strength isn't cruelty. I shook my head. I don't want to lead. Then what do you want? I looked down at Fenris, all at his milk-white eyes that had never seen my face, but somehow knew it anyway. And in that moment, I understood the final piece of the puzzle. He wasn't blind. He had never been blind, not really. His eyes didn't work the way other wolves' eyes worked, but they saw. They saw through me. Every time I'd held him, every time I'd fed him, every time I'd whispered promises into the dark, he'd been looking out at the world through my eyes. We were connected. Had been since the moment I found him, two broken things that had made each other whole. I want to leave, I said. Fenris, we want to find somewhere that doesn't believe in defects, somewhere that understands what we are. The elders exchanged glances. Then slowly, they nodded. Jonas is exiled, one pronounced. He will find no shelter in any pack that honors the old laws. As for you, he studied me with ancient, knowing eyes. You go with our blessing and our warning. Warning? The power you've awakened doesn't sleep once it's been roused. You'll never be what you were. You'll never be just an Omega again. I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in months. I never wanted to be just an Omega. We left at dawn. The territory stretched out behind us. All those places I'd suffered, all those moments I'd survived, and I didn't look back. Not once. The road ahead was uncertain, dangerous, full of wolves who might not understand what we were or why we'd had to become it. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. Fenris shifted in my arms, his nose finding the hollow of my throat, and I felt what he felt. The warmth of the rising sun, the smell of freedom, the steady beat of a heart that had learned to love in the darkness. I'd saved him by destroying myself, starved my body to feed his spirit, sacrificed everything I was so that he could become everything he was meant to be. And somehow, impossibly, that destruction had saved me too. They didn't call me a hero when the story spread. They didn't call me a villain either. They called me a warning, a reminder that even the lowest wolf can become something terrifying. That the ones you starve might be the ones who learn to feed on something deeper than food. That the defects you try to destroy might just be the seeds of your own destruction. I don't know what comes next. I don't know what Fenris and I will become, or where this road will take us, or whether the power sleeping in my bones will save us or consume us. But I know one thing for certain. I will never starve for someone else's cruelty again. And if you've made it this far, if you felt what I felt, raged when I raged, hoped when I hoped against all hope, then do me one last favor. Share this story Not for me. For every wolf out there who's been told they're too weak, too broken, too defective to matter. For every Omega who's been starving in silence, waiting for someone to see them. Tell them what I learned in that steel mill, with the hounds circling and the alpha smiling and a blind pup pressed against my heart. The ones who survive the hunger are the ones who learn to become the feast. Subscribe. Hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next story, because this was just the beginning.